Hi, John Vance here. This is part 2 of the B Shifter podcast. On this episode, we're continuing the conversation talking about perspective and how us as leaders can lend perspective to our firefighters, especially those that maybe don't have the experience level that we have, but they're very educated, they're go-getters. But how do we reframe things and let them understand really why we do the things that we do? So let's continue and pick up this conversation here with myself, Nick Brunacini, and Terry Garrison.
The evolution of a firefighter, joining a fire department and then promoting through it and the rest of it, is you've got to train them to be successful in those roles. So like going from firefighter to company officer, that was a step. And you had to learn, okay, this is what I'm doing. And if you did it, because I did it early in the thing, and most of it wasn't to be the boss. It's just that I didn't want them to be my boss. Yeah. So,
but that motivated a lot of us.
Yeah. But you get to that point and you think, okay, now I can like actually manage this the tact the way I think it needs to be managed. So you're a task. It took a while to figure out I'm the task level boss here. I'm not the nozzleman anymore.
Yes.
Somebody else. In fact, I need them to do that so I can do what I need to do. Well, it's an even bigger change when you go from company officer to battalion chief. So when the group that I took the BC's test was, once the test was over, is they put us through 2 different BC academies. Mercury Moores put one on, and then the A shifters put the other on, Hobel and company. And each of them were a week, right? So we go through this thing, and it's a week long, and you got Mercury's was everything, and then the A shift was just like tactics. So we get done with that, and then the first time I go off, there wasn't a spot for me. So they sent me up north because the guy who was typically up there was off for whatever reason. And it probably had something to do with something he did. It wasn't like vacation or anything. And Sid was his aide.
Right.
And so I get there and I'm like, hey man, this is like a BC. But I had been a captain a long time. So it was the opposite of like becoming a captain. So it's like I knew, like tactically I knew probably more than Sid did at that point in my career, right.
Because you paid attention.
Well, and I was in places where you got baked more and all the rest of it. So I remember I sat in my office at 7. And, okay, I looked around, and at like 9 o'clock, Sid comes in and says, "Do you want to go out?" And I said, "Well, tell me the routine here." And because it was Dawn, was the guy. He says, "Well, usually we leave. We would have left an hour ago, and we get back here about 6 o'clock at night." And I said, What are you doing? He says he wanted to go visit every single station, every shift. I thought, this is the biggest battalion in the city, and it's like 200 square miles. And it was. I mean, that was your area. It had like 18 stations in it. And like, why does he do that? He says, because he's the chief. And I said, well, I'm the chief now. And he says, what do you want to do? I said, well, just close the door. I'm going to look at this clock for another hour or two to think about it. So, and I remember talking to my old man later on about it, a year or two later, and he says, well, what'd you do? I said, well, I stayed at the 41 and talked to the helicopter crew for a little while, and, well, did you visit any stations? I said, I was there for like a month, and I think I went to 6 stations. But I had business at them.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you go visit your stations? Why? Well, just, you're the boss. Well, don't they know that? I mean, I'm a battalion chief now, and they're captains and firefighters. They know who the boss is. I don't. Well, it's just kind of blah, blah, blah. And we talked long enough that he was finally like, I'm done talking to you because I think you should go visit the stations, but you're kind of talking me out of that. And I thought, well, yeah, I don't, that's wasted motion on my part. So if I'm going to go talk to, he says, you want to avoid where like every time you show up, something bad happens.
Yeah.
Well, when something bad happens, I show up. That's kind of why people call 911.
Yeah, so
So it was.
I probably think more like your dad a little bit, but here's the deal.
Well,
You know
yeah,
that. But here's the deal. So,
I was looking for somebody to talk me into it, but I couldn't find them.
well, here's the deal. It's we talked about perspective, right? So this
Yeah.
is all about perspective. Why are you visiting the station? Well, you know why that guy visited the station.
Oh, yeah.
So he could remind him that he was in charge of them.
Yeah.
And then he would rouse people around, then he would leave. You would go in the station with a different perspective. Hey, I'm here. What do you guys need? What's going on? I'll see you later. And you don't have to. And I always thought, I told my people, I asked them, I said, hey, if you could visit them like once a week, you know, that way when you do have an issue that you got to go out there and be serious with them, they're like that deal your dad says. Every time they see you, they go, oh, here he is. What did we do wrong thing? Just go out, see what they need. So there's a sweet spot in there, right? And
Yeah,
and
there
what,
is.
and what-
Yeah, there is.
And what your perspective is when you go out there, and then how they perceive you going out there. And there is some, like I would tell young battalion chiefs, if you got a captain that you just can't stand, and you had one, visit them first.
I had more than one.
Yeah, I say visit them first in the morning. Get it out of your way. Go by and have a cup of coffee with the crew, because just because you hate the captain, the crew likes seeing you because they hate the captain also. Just so you know, everybody, that guy, you're not the only one.
Yeah.
And then you visit the crew, and then you leave. But people would, because when I was a new battalion chief, I would put that guy off to the end of the day or the end of the week, and then I'd go, and it ruined my entire evening. I would leave like that bad taste in my mouth. I'd go home. It's like, no, I want to visit. I'm going to get the bad news out of the way.
That's exactly how I did it, man. It's like
Yeah,
anything bad I want to do first, and then have fun on the back end.
I wouldn't screw with the guy. I'm like, I will see him sooner or later.
Well, his crew wants to see you, though.
Well, when I did the fill-in for about a month, and then they sent me to the 3rd Battalion. I saw everybody at least once a week.
Yeah,
because you were rolling with them. You were in a busy battalion. And then we would train together. You had more than enough opportunities. But I'll give you an example. There was a fire station, and there was on the weekends, cars would cruise past the station. It became a social place. They only because of the location of the station, right there.
Yeah.
Cars just on the weekends, low riders, hot rods, whole thing. Young kids, older people, ha ha ha. So you had a number of firefighters sitting outside on the bus bench in front of the fire station, on the property there, and they're. So you start to hear things about the station, and you're like, oh, okay. So you hear something, I go by the station then. Like during the day, no cruising's going on. And you're just kind of hanging out talking to the captains, and you're like, there's a lot of, like on fire calls, we get there, we transfer command and do a set of things so you guys don't get killed while you're doing your job. So you can focus, you can micromanage your task level. So strategically, we got the whole big picture. And I said, it's my job as the battalion chief here to make sure you don't kill yourself while you're on duty. There's other ways to kill yourself. And I said, just for an example, like if there was, everybody's having a good time and all of a sudden the outside good time ends up good time in the parking lot or the station dorm. That's death. And I said, if that happens and it gets blown up and you have to react, I said, the people that are going to die first are the captains. And you kind of, and so then you just stop talking. And I'm like, what's your point?
Oh, they knew what your point was.
Finally, he said, we get it. Okay. See you later. And I don't know, I did that 4 or 5 times over a period of 4 or 5 years, and never had an issue. I mean, that kind of was enough. Now, I guess if it kept going, then you're at the point where, okay, I'm going to have to intervene and just be frank with you guys. And,
you set the expectations.
Well, and you're also talking about the consequences, which I think a lot of times when we're talking about the perspective, people aren't talking about the consequences of what's going to happen.
Exactly. And I contexted, and it's my job to save you. It's to make you effective as you could be, and then to save you from yourselves at some
and
point.
you've seen it before. You saw that happen.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
No. I used to. You have to know sin to fight sin. So, yeah. I worked in fire stations where the captain would go out to his camper, and you're like, or it doesn't smell right in the dorm. What's going on here? So, because you hire human beings, and that's what B shifters, man, will. My dad said firefighters, most occupations by young, neurally challenged males, they're always hungry and horny.
Yeah.
That's just, they're always consuming. So
he used to say he wants us to be celibate and sober for 24 hours.
that's it. That's all we expect. Hey,
Well, you talk about consequences, and it's important to distinguish consequences as not threatening.
Yes.
Because I've had that, and I've
Those
seen
are
guys
predictions.
say, if you do this, I'm going to write you up, or you're going to get fired. That's bullshit.
Yeah, no,
Don't do
that's
that.
that's
But
cookie
the way
cutter.
But the way you did is, if this continues, something negative is going to occur.
Yeah.
Because I've had fire captains tell firefighters, here's what's going to happen, and then that didn't happen, and then they lose that opportunity to. Then the issue doesn't become what that firefighter did. The issue becomes that fire captain got that shoved up his arse, however that happened. So you got it right. So I knew what you meant when you said consequences. I just want to make sure that the listeners heard.
As a
it too.
BC, I wasn't in charge of consequences. So I had situations where like crews did things they shouldn't have done, and it's okay. This is you guys laid hands on each other. You can't fist fight in the station. So you're both suspended. Just go home. And they said, "What are we getting paid?" I said, "That ain't up to me. I don't care." Well, I do care, and if it's up to me, no, you're not going to get paid for at least 2 or 3 weeks.
But they do.
I said, "I'm not in charge of that, and there's an investigation that's going to be first. You go home right now and do not come back to work until somebody from the fire department calls you. I can do that, and I know that I'm okay there." So I called the shift commander, say, "Hey, such and such, and this is going on. I need 2 people to report, blah, 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 blah." So, and then it goes to personnel, and there's, oddly enough, 2 months later, it was all retroactive. They docked 2 weeks' pay and did what they did. Because I knew, based on what they were doing, what the outcome was. I thought, no, you guys, you already screwed the pooch in this thing. And I guess maybe, Vance, to answer your question, is I knew that, but I had been there for 24 years. And thought, I know what's going to happen to you. And they're like, bullshit, man. You're just going to stick that straight up your ass. And I'm like, it's going to go up yours and out your mouth before it comes in mine, pal. And it will kill you if it comes into me. So,
Nick, you said that deal where you send them home. Mm-hmm. And you like to use fire ground analogies too in the hazard zone. Mm-hmm. Same thing.
Yeah.
You need to get off the hazard zone.
There's a mayday. There's a mayday going on, and we're going to fix it right now.
But I've told fire crews, one captain in particular, is load your crew up because he freelanced. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a really strong command system when I got there.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
this was a learning opportunity for everybody. So go tell the fire captain on the ladder company to get his crew and go back to the station. He's no longer on this incident.
Yeah.
What? But he always does that. Yeah, that's why he's going home. Mm-hmm. That's why he's going back to the station. And I'll go talk to him at the station.
See, Terry,
but you got to have that.
And he thought he was in charge of you, that captain, and that you can't do this. And then what it did is it completely turned his world upside down because it's like, oh no, I have a boss now. And I think that's news to some people. Like, oh, there's actually people in charge of me.
Yes.
Well, that'll happen at that captain level and at that battalion chief tactical level. When tactical chief finds out that their assistant, the boss, that they have a boss, you mean I can't control my entire district or battalion the way I want to? I got a boss up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do, because it's got to look like yours needs to look like the rest of the system, right?
Well, and I think what your boss, like you're a battalion chief, what your boss wants is everybody to do as good as they can and then to go home at the end of the day. And so that's accountability for them. And then, so they want you to manage that way. And then, like, others, like, let's say that ladder captain's like, no, I do this, and what you have to do is support me in it. And you're like, no, I'm your boss. This is what this looks like. So, and we've had conversations with those people, and they don't seem to understand that until they put themselves in the position to test it. And they found out with you that a chief in a car outranks a captain on a roof.
Yeah,
basically.
It kind of reminded me, and I've used this analogy before because I love my brother who's passed away now, but he used to come up to me and he'd say, Terry, don't get mad at me. Can I have $20? And I'd say, Michael, don't get mad at me. The answer is no.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, who got mad?
Yeah.
Well, that's like when a supervisor, when a battalion chief talks to a captain, and the captain's being an idiot for whatever, doing something that's inappropriate, and then the battalion chief says something to him, he's like, who gets mad? The captain gets all butthurt. Hey, man, why are you telling me to act like that? Because it's the right way to act. Just quit doing that.
Yeah.
Quit running with scissors or whatever the hell you're doing because you're going to get hurt.
I think out of the three of us, I have more direct contact with the young firefighters still coming in because of the part-time job that I'm doing. And these 25-year-old, and so exactly what you're saying about the consequences. That I've been here 25 years. I know this is what's going to happen. We have to take that to the fireground with our fireground message, whether it's risk management or anything else, because again, that's where the perspective is. We've seen it happen. I'm having a talk with a 25-year-old last week about, and I love what ifing. You know, I'll sit down with them and we're just having coffee at the station.
Well, that's what the inside of fire stations is for, right? It's exploring the universe.
So they're doing construction and all this other stuff's going on in our first do. And I said, what if we had a fire in this building? Where would you go in? What do you? And he goes, well, yeah, if we get a fire here, I think I would trench cut the roof. And I was like, well, time out. When was the last time you trench cut a roof?
Never, sir.
Never.
Where'd you hear the word?
Yeah. You saw it on a video where like 6 guys from LA are doing it. We have 2 and 3 person companies. The building is going to burn down if in my area we're trench cutting a roof on a commercial structure. It ain't happening. So let's talk about reality right now. You know, let's come back. You know, this isn't YouTube. What are we going to do? And they need to be refrained from that because they're getting. And these guys today are smarter. They are better. They take better care of themselves,
they got
I think.
Answers right here, right? They can go get the answer to anything right there.
And my point to the leaders out there is you need to give them that perspective because you own that perspective and they don't have it yet. They have a lot of other good things going for them, but they don't have that perspective.
No, that's true.
See, but it's part of that's a product of experience. And there's no way you can get... The only way you can short track experience is through training, realistic training. And that kind of will set the stage for it, but then that has to be revalidated with actual application. And so that's where the performance management model comes in. And we keep, and that's the way we refine the thing. And so you'll hear young fire, why are we changing anything? And you think, well, everything has to change all the time. That's the way it gets better. Yeah. Well, no, we don't agree with that. I said, well, that's the way the union negotiates for us. So when I came on the fire department, we made this much money, and now we make this much because of all this progress we made. Well, that's positive change, sir. That's what we're for. And we're for positive change in everything. Our tactics have improved. All of this should get better and better. That's the way, that's maybe why we're born onto this planet, is to figure out better ways to do things, and maybe that ends up better ways to treat and get along with one another, where we all kind of get what we want out of this thing. Now, if what you want is to grift and to have a bunch around, that ain't going to be sustainable here because we're a public safety agency.
Yes.
We're not a football team or anything else. We deliver service to Mrs. Smith. In fact, I wonder how, like the young people, many of them would take if you let them know that you are the largest chunk of government. Yeah. It's the fire department. You and the cops are the largest chunk, public safety, of local government. Yep. And if we put all those local governments together, we overwhelm all. The states don't even measure up. And so the states are in a position, especially the one we live in, where they're pissed off at the cities, and we're going to tell you what to do because we're the staties. And then you got the feds, and God knows what's spinning that wheel today. So there's just no rhyme or reason to any of it. So you come back in your closed little fire department shell, and really that's kind of odd where you think this makes the most sense. Because it all sticks to the laws of nature, everything we do. Fire, EMS, hazmat, tech rescue, highly technical occupations based on science and knowledge. Yeah. So we should embrace that.
No, you're right. And when you were talking, you made me think of something we should probably add here. It's most successful when the labor group and the administration work together for the common goal. And that eliminates so many problems. Now, you don't have to be a fire chief who's a union puppet. That's ridiculous. No. They have their role, you have your role, and you're going to disagree about some issues. I agree with the labor group every time they say firefighters need more money. Why wouldn't you? I mean, all boats rise. I'm going to get a pay raise too, right?
Hey, man, during our careers, Pat can tell me everybody that works for the city of Phoenix more money, including the city manager, the mayor, everybody.
I still get more money because of him.
Exactly.
Even we just got to
here, this is the way, one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. System process.
Yeah,
you capture it all. It's not, you focus your energy. It's almost a military deal. It's like, no, this is the way we're going to exercise the power we have. First of all, create it, and then to use it in a positive manner.
So it's important for a fire chief to understand what a union president is working on and say, okay, I get what you're working on over there, and I'm going to stay out of your way with that, unless it's something I just totally disagree with. But I think it's just as important for a union president to understand what's important to the fire chief. Firefighter safety and customer service, and here's the way we're going to do that. And get the union president on board with you, so when you bring into these programs like the Blue Card, where you want to train or the system and how to be more effective on the fire ground, you got the union president marching right with you and saying, yeah, that is better for our member. The best thing, they say union presidents want to take care of their members. Helping them survive is a really good way to take care of people.
Well, we were just talking about that today. The person in the large fire department doing Blue Card who just took over Blue Card is the former union president. Yeah. So, I mean, that's an excellent example of the leadership of the fire department pushing it forward.
Well, and I want to say, if you're in a department that's either like paid on call firefighters, non-unionized, my first 8 years of fire chief, we didn't have a union. But what we did in my first year was we made, I call it a relations committee, a member from each shift. And they would get the input, and then they'd all get together with me, and we talk about stuff, whatever it was, and that was the same issues that the union wanted. A lot of times it was, retiree health care and,
I think the only difference is in a labor group, they formally recognize this person is representing us.
Yes.
But in an informal system, they could get together and say, these people represent us. And they stay connected that way, because that's all you're doing is, like you said, coming together like this. Well, it's hard to get everybody together like this, but when you got a person that's standing up representing all that, and you just kind of grab that person, and their responsibility is to connect with all them, that's labor, right? I mean, that's the way I see it anyway. Yeah. Is they are elected to represent that group of people, that group of firefighters. And the way you did it is you just identified people that were motivated and they could, speak complete sentences, and they represented their groups.
Well,
right?
and they play off each other. So, like, a lot of unions will come out against safety stuff. So an example of that is, like, in our careers, we had day boots. And then we went away from day boots. Jeff Griffith fell in an attic. No more day boots. Well, that was before he fell in the attic. We had a couple close calls before then. Fire chief said no more day boots. Well, I don't think the union president really gave a shit, to be honest. Our union president was a politician for the fire department, and he was very good at what he did. So he thought, well, he's the fire chief. That's his decision to make. Well, it was the workforce is like, how you're going to kill us. You're killing us by taking the day boots away. I mean, this is just the level of idiocy that the herd has. And so you can't do that. When you're like, yeah, they can. He's the fire chief. That's his job. Well, the union stayed out of it. And they're like, let it. And can tell me, this is a loser right here. If I come out for him in favor of this, they're all going to go crazy, and I can just shut up, and he can do what he's going to do, and I'm not going to say anything about it.
I didn't get involved with pension talk.
Yeah,
I don't want nothing to
he
do.
stayed in his lane. Fire chief stayed in his lane. So what happened is they just listened to all the bullshit, right? And it happened for months leading up to this. There was a deal. Well, it started with the shoes, steel toe shoes, and then it went to day boots.
Oh, I thought the other order.
No, it was steel toe boots first, and then day boots went away.
Okay.
But it was hand in hand.
Now, day boots, for those of us that don't know what...
Galoshes.
So...
Waders.
So that was... you wouldn't have to wear bunker pants.
Yeah, you had just regular pants on and a long jacket.
They were rubber boots that folded down.
Oh, yeah, like the
and you
pull-up boots.
fold
Yeah,
them up.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
they were
gotcha.
like fishing waders.
Yeah.
And
Okay, we
mine,
had those.
and everybody over 5'9", between your boot and your jacket, you had an open space where you'd leave. Where back then we would wear the Nuvos.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And water went in them.
Polyester jeans.
Oh, yeah, they were
They
awful.
burned. Water went in them. They were terrible. But I was one of the guys that said, "Don't get rid of our day boots because they're just so simple."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, they was just.
I have a picture of a fire chief out in front of a house 2 weeks ago in day boots and a long coat.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, they're still wearing them out there.
Well, we go through this whole thing, and it's Civil War Wildcat strike's going to happen with day boots, day boots and the steel toe shoes, some combination of the two. And so it was like a throwdown, and the fire chief says no. We've tried to process this through the process we have with these committees, and they just refuse to do it because they can't let go of the past. So what we're going to do is September 1st. And so this is like June, July. Yeah. He says everybody's going to be outfitted on September 1st. If we see anybody in day boots, the captain's going home, and they're coming back to whatever rank they were before they were a captain, right? Because you had these old senior captains just mouth, you won't tell me what to do. September 1st came, and because they said, no, he's going to send me home. You know how many of them showed up September 1st in day boots? 0. Because they're all talk. That's what it is. And see, as a young chief, you think, oh, I can't upset them because they'll talk back. Who gives a shit what they say? In fact, sometimes it's fun just to piss them off when they're doing stupid things.
And what happened 2 weeks after we had those pants? Everybody loved them.
Oh, it was next day. And you know what they did is over a period of just a little bit, they thought, no, don't argue with him. He's the fire chief. That's his job.
When I'm working out in my fire station now in my gym shorts, I don't have to run in and put on my Nuvos and my day boots. I just need to pull up my turnout pants. Yeah. Oh, I love this. This is a better system.
So,
right?
Vance, when you just do your job and fill your role, that has huge advantages because it just became the way we did business. I remember I was a brand new captain, and we had remodeled part of our fire station inappropriately. And it was, the colors didn't match or something. But it was nothing that anybody would notice, but, the rule keepers, they can't do this stuff. So they're processing all this stuff, and there were posters hanging up of, like A-shifters, men and women, what they look like, and, girls riding tigers and, all chiseled abs and bunker pants and the rest. And somebody made the comment, they said, these, like, pulpy posters we're hanging up in the station, we're not opposed to them, but, they could cause some problems with, like, the public coming in and other firefighters may not like them. So let's not make a big deal out of it, but would you go back to the station? Would you just replace them with something else? Just something that, you know, people can't bitch about. And like a month later, they were all down. And then I remember a couple months after that, another one went up in kind of a public way, and somebody bitched about it. And they went to the station and they said, no, we agreed just to take these down. Just take it down. Don't put it back up, okay? Nobody wrote anything down. They didn't, and nobody got in trouble. It's just keep them down.
There's no formal tiger
and
policy.
then exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the way they manage the fire department, because they put the front end work of establishing here's how these processes
Nick,
work.
you did it with our Silverback leadership when you decided, and you did it. I'm going to give you credit for it, but we had the 8 functions of leadership, and you said, no, the very first chapter needs to talk about the work, because everything else needs to focus on the work.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
And that makes so much sense. And I think if you can describe whatever you're describing, whether you're a captain, a battalion chief, or a fire chief, to somebody to improve whatever they're doing, and you tell them this is how it impacts the work in a positive way, it's going to be, you're going to be okay.
The work overcomes all the differences and diversity in the group.
Yeah.
It bonds us together. So, and it was because of the work that they were able to do the thing with the posters. No, just take them down. Don't do that anymore. Be nice to each other. Quit being mean.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and that's kind of what we managed around. Everybody did what they were supposed to based on that.
And then there was and it was actually written in our firefighter survival guide that we'll share with our program also, but it was written that fire captains can't overlook safety violations. Battalion chiefs do not have the option not to follow up on those. So that kind of became the policy for the entire organization. When you did something silly, whatever it wasn't written, but if you do something silly, someone's going to talk to you about that. If you do this, if you have whores in your station, don't be surprised if somebody tells you don't have them in your station.
No, you can't. See, and that's kind of the world we live in. It's a public facility, a fire station, because it's paid for through the local body politic, property taxes, yada, yada, yada. At the same time, that's the residential unit where those firefighters live. Yeah. And that is their station, and they take possession of it.
And you want them to have ownership.
Yeah. Well, see, but it's you guys, this is your station, but you were taking care of it for the public, and they will end up in here occasionally. So you can't deny entrance to this is the communities.
But it got to the point where you knew that a supervisor, when they were, and it didn't always work, right? So, but when you talked to somebody about poor performance, they weren't surprised that you were talking to them. And really, that's where you want to get to in an organization. When somebody does something so out of whack that everybody else is going, did you see that? I mean, you would see it in meetings where you'd have 20 or 30 people and somebody would do something so stupid. And everybody would go, what are you going to do about that?
But, you know, if you gave them a list of names and said, pick who did it, everybody would circle the right name.
But that would be the challenge, right?
Yeah.
You get a new chief officer, and he'd be in there with Captain Knucklehead, and then they go, let's see how new guy does with this.
Well, in the oral, they would just use the name. This is the guy working for you. What are you going to do? And you're like, oh, Jesus. Nobody else has been able to tame that one.
But you got to try.
Good luck. Well, I'm sending them home. I don't know.
It's not your fault, but it's your problem now.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. You got to you said it. You got to own the problem.
So one of the things that you said a while back, Nick, and it stuck with me, was, you got Bobby Backstep, firefighter, who is going to question every strategic decision the IC makes, and they want to go in and hard charging, and they're hormonally challenged and everything else.
We've all been there.
Yeah, but you said that person doesn't have to cash the check.
No.
So what does that mean? And let's explore that for a moment.
See, like when an incident scene, somebody is in charge of that incident, whoever it is. If it's an EMS call, it's the officer of the rig and the paramedics, basically. Co-manage the thing however they do. An incident where it's like a structure fire, that's going to be the strategic presence there, owns it. That's theirs. Like Garrison say, you got to own it. So you actually take command of the thing. Well, now you've got, see, you look at the NFPA 1700. What is it? 18 people of structure fire in a 2,000 square foot house. 18 people. There is two, hopefully, at least one, hopefully two people in the command post that are managing that structure fire. They own it. They sign the back of that check. The IC is the poster child for that incident. So whatever happens to that incident that's who they're going to associate it with, not Bobby Backstep, who cheap noise is all that is. As the old guy said, they boo the loudest from the cheapest seats. So, and you got to be able to filter that out and think, no, I'm the strategic presence here, pal. That building's going to the dump, and you don't get to do your recreational firefighting here. So you're going to be in the cold zone, pumping water onto the hot zone. You're not going to go in. Well, it is what it is. And let them bitch, let them complain. It's complaining is a way that people off gas whatever's going on in their life.
You mean the pilot doesn't care what I'm saying as a passenger in the back of the plane?
No, they don't.
They don't care.
No, they really. And in fact, if you get too loud, they're going to throw you off that plane.
He'll be on a no-fly list in no time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Son of a gun, hit another.
If you're disruptive enough, you're going to learn how to take the bus.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of it. You're the adult of the thing. You're in charge. You're the one in charge of that. So that's
if you know you got a kid that's going to grab the steering wheel when you're driving, don't put him in the front seat.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you got to manage those things because
Yeah.
you own that incident, and you need to place people in there.
Well, and that can't be something that you're always having to fix. Is people taking the wrong actions? It thinks because they're going to kill themselves, and it's
Yeah.
like, no, we don't. I'm on the scene, fully involved, taking an inch and a half inside offensive. You think, no, time out. That doesn't line up with reality. What you're saying. And in fact, what you're going to do is you're going to hurt other people. So now I become complicit if I just allow that to happen.
That's the key.
So that's kind of the other thing. Now, Vance, you go to Canada, and if somebody gets hurt doing something they're not supposed to do, the fire chief is criminally responsible for that. So it's not, we'll say civil, they're responsible here civilly because, if your family sues, you do something stupid as a firefighter, you get toasted in the line of duty, your family has the right to process that legally. And we're seeing more and more of that happening.
Yes,
well, if you're the fire chief and you're not going to manage this, and my loved one gets hurt because of your inaction, what that's going to do is that's going to cost your employer a ton of money and legal exposure, because now in other countries it's like, no, you've reached another benchmark, chief. We've done that with driving in the U.S. We're like, if you're an emergency responder and you cause a fatal accident, you're probably going to go to prison for that.
Yep.
Yeah. And well, in Canada, the fire chief is going to go with you. So what it is strategic leadership says, no, we don't allow this to take place here anymore.
But
So,
the least organization should do is when that engineer does something where he's speeding or she's speeding and cause a problem, they should be held accountable, and the captain sitting up in the front seat. We've done that organizationally.
Yeah, and sometimes we were too lax with that.
Yeah.
Like when they did, you roll a ladder truck coming back from a call, that guy probably shouldn't be the engineer ever again. I would say if you're going to drive anything, it's not going to be much past
And the captain
an AMBO.
needs to be the co-pilot.
Well, and the captain wasn't even on the truck because he was. Well, and then you get into just the details, like the family history of the department you work for. And so, again, that's where you start putting names to this. And like in the Silverback, we talk about there's 10 personality types in the fire department, and that's it. There's 10 or 12. And they're the same 10 or 12 in every single fire department. And so this thing I'm building now, that's kind of where it's going. It's saying, no. All fire departments have the same exact people working for them. Every one of them does. Now, they may have different concentrations of them. The difference between fire departments is the leadership, especially at the top. This is what I represent as the fire chief in charge of this whole organization, and this is what this is going to look like. So That's the difference from department to department. We'd use our own department as an example. We were role models forever, and over a series of fire chiefs, they're a regular fire department again. It's like, no, they have, the difference was it took generations to get it where it was, and then when you have an absence, it's like, imagine if you stopped doing EMS training. There's no more for paramedics or EMTs. You guys keep it on your own. What's that going to look like 6 months from now?
Well, our EMS standards.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to do any of it.
Yeah, we're just going to stick with what we learned whenever you took your
during the
basic
Civil
training.
War. Yeah, you know, take a drink of whiskey and then just
you're putting mass pants on people
Rub dirt
and
on it.
yeah.
bite the block.
Well, that's what happens with firefighting, because there's nothing like the young guy goes through the academy and gets nothing else. They promote to company officer. There's no further training. Do you look at officer 1 and 2, 3 and 4? There's no fire ground training in any of it. You don't get to fire ground. No one agrees on it. Do you know why? Because there's not a standardized. Well,
there is.
There is, but there's no mandate to do it. Right. There's nothing that causes a fire department to actually train their members past firefighter 1 and 2 in structural firefighting. So that is why it's the Wild West. When we do the 3 other service types, and those most fire chiefs couldn't tell you how much they spend. I've asked fire chiefs, how much do you spend keeping your people certified EMS wise? I don't know. How much you spend doing firefighter training? We spent $5,000 last year doing this, and it was bullshit. Mm-hmm. Well, you spent $50,000 on EMS training. You don't even understand or know or care about that. Yeah. So over here, this little thing that you do the least amount, that carries the highest risk, but has the most identifiable juice for us, and that's whatever that ain't going to work, pal. So now, if you say there's 35,000 fire departments in North America, right? That's the number they keep throwing out there. That means there's 35,000 different ways that they're managing the structural fire response. And there's really 2 or 3 ways you're doing that. Most of it's, you're either doing NIMS, you're doing blue card, or you're freelancing. Oh, we do the SOP 1A72, and yeah, it's a freelancing manual. That's what it is. The companies go where they think they need to go. There's no single incident action plan and the rest of it. So you don't have a process. So everybody's operating at a disadvantage in those systems because there's no way to fix anything or to make it better. In fact, it's almost like the fire chiefs sabotage it intentionally to keep it the way it is so they don't have to do anything with it. But the problem is that's where your biggest mistakes happen. The most costly consequences are on the fire ground.
Well, you care about your members, take care of them.
Yeah. So I mean, you're unnecessarily exposing them to things they don't need to be exposed to.
And those same people that will spout off that craziness are the same people that say, well, I love my firefighters. Then why wouldn't you want them to survive another incident?
Yeah, and what they'll do is they say, well, look at all the decon we do on the back end. And they say, okay, after the fire's over, you clean their gear, but during the thing, you won't manage the strategy while they're actually like in the shadow of death. Mm-hmm. What you're going to do is you're going to try to keep them from getting cancer when they retire. But if they die on duty, we'll throw you a great funeral and we'll give your widow a flag, and it's all, it's just part of the job. And you're like, no, it isn't part of the job. It's yeah.
And in this case, you don't, which I've seen, you don't give the widow the flag, you give the parents. Mm-hmm. That is unfreaking believable. When you got a young firefighter who passed away, not even old enough to get married yet, and for whatever reason, the system may have failed them, and now you're handing a flag to the mom or the dad.
Well, and then you go back and think, okay, what the incident they died in, what did we save? And you're like, no, they hauled it all. We knew when we got there. I'll go back to the fenced-off deal. It's going to the dump. Well, there's no adult there. And they're like, well, no, I had it. I had the strategy. They just weren't doing it. And you're like, well, no, you're like the teacher where they're all going crazy in the class and you're still writing math problems on the board and they're killing each other. It takes another set of skills here to diffuse this.
I was a fire chief starting at a younger age, and probably one of the best things that put my job into perspective for me is we're having lunch at the station one day, and there's two brothers that worked at the fire department, and their dad came into lunch. So the dad's there, we all have lunch together. We get done, he goes, "Hey, can I talk to you for a minute?" So he goes in my office, he shuts the door. I was like, "Oh, this is going to be interesting." And he was a retired firefighter, I knew him from that. And he got tears in his eyes, and he goes, "You know, I need to trust you with my boys, and I hope you take good care of them and look out for them."
Wow, you gave me the chills. That's a big deal.
And I mean, and this guy was serious.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
And that reframed my job for me so much going forward from that, is because I was thinking, his name's Bernie. I was thinking about Bernie when I'm making decisions, or I'm, being the fire chief, and it's like, we have parents, to your point, that are counting on us to send those kids back home.
No, every time that we have a graduation ceremony at the academy, and you're up there and you're looking out at the family members, you're responsible for that as a fire chief, right?
Yep.
You're responsible for every one of those family members, the moms, the dads, the husbands, the wives, the children. And you shouldn't get wound up in that. You should just know that that's your responsibility. Implement processes and cultures that keep them safe, and then carry that out and continue to improve that, because we don't do that enough.
No, you see, you got a process. Listen, like you said, Vance, you're the chief, and the parent comes to you and says, "Okay, you're taking care of my loved ones. That's what I expect of you." See, and now the system has to have support that with processes where you could do it. So I'm a BC in your system. Well, now what I look at is I don't really see them as, okay, I'm going to do a certain set of things to keep you as safe as I can, Jimmy, because your dad told Vance. What I do is I look at how are we going, I'm in charge of this response to this structure fire. I have been to enough of these structure fires where Blue Card applies standard actions to standard conditions to achieve a standard outcome. I did this long enough where I could pull up, and there's no task level units there, and I could tell you what the outcome was going to be before we did any actions. I could say, based on the current incident conditions, we're going to do these three things in this order and sequence, and 10 minutes from now, this is where we're going to be in this thing, right? And so it was all about effectiveness, as I'm going to show up and I'm going to do this as well, as quickly, all those things that I can do. And see, because I grew up in this system and we have been using this as the process to manage this, as I understand what our capabilities and limitations are of like science, of this set of conditions. I pull up to the scene of a 25,000 square foot wood frame building that has a wide span roof, wooden roof structure on it. And 30% of the roof is free burning right now. And it's got some defensive vents that have happened. I can tell you in 30 minutes that building's going to be on the ground. Mm-hmm. There's nothing you're going to do offensively to save it, ever. I've been to 300 of those fires, and every one of them ended the same way.
And depending on the contents, it could be a lot less than
massive collapses, the whole thing. I don't need to, okay, we're going to do this and this offensively. No, I'm going to start defensive because there's nothing there to save. Anyway, you put
standard conditions.
You put the critical factors in and you just load it all up and there you go. So that becomes like almost, the problem with that is it becomes standard. And you're like, you can get surprised with standard things and think, well, I missed this and this is why this happened. So it's still dynamic enough that you have to keep your guard up all the time and always be sizing the thing up. Well, that's the way you keep your promise to the dad who said, take care of my kids. Your kids are going to operate in this system when they're at the scene of a fire. I have full faith in this because I can tell you how much I spend training, the time I spend training, and the effect of that training. So that's kind of the way you manage that. It's
Well, one more question for you guys, and then we'll get to our
No.
timeless tactical truth.
Okay.
All right.
So what is your go-to message then for leaders out there, emerging leaders, captains, chiefs, people on their way up, when they have those smart, aggressive young firefighters who haven't lived through the perspective yet? When they don't have that perspective, what's a message that we can give those emerging leaders on how to deal with that?
You train them. That's where we made our biggest deals, was in a training setting. When we wanted to fix something or change something or make it better or educate people, is you had to. And see, going back to like the beginning of this is, okay, you go to this station, and this station. Well, I figured out my time's better spent in training settings, and then actual get out of the truck at the scene of the incident and own it. It's come out, and this is what we do and why we do it. So that's the way I would approach it right there to begin with.
And I would say use the system that we have, and the system isn't something out there, it's tangible that you grab. The system is simply tell them what you expect from them that matches the organizational expectations, firefighter safety, customer service. Ask them if they know how to do that, they need any more explaining or training on that. And then watch them do it from a distance. Don't micromanage them and don't be an asshole about it. And then if you see them do something wrong, you step in and correct it in the best, kindest way you can, depending on the hazard. If it's in a hazard zone, the quickest way you can to fix that. And then if they did something right, tell them, nice job. Do that again, because that's what I want to see you do. And it's just as simple. You just set just like you would with your... I hate to call firefighters kids, but it's the same thing. It's the adult. Be the adult and help them be successful. And remember that the reason you took the position of leadership is to support. You support. That supervision is a support position. So help them out. Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Help them out.
Yeah.
It's about application at that point, and the application is experience. So they say experience gives the test ahead of the lesson. Yeah. So so our job is to give them the lesson to kind of, at least it gets them ready to start absorbing experiences, and then it makes sense of that. But that's kind of the, see, like on the task level, a young firefighter coming in, if they pass the academy, they understand the task level evolutions that they're going to be part of. So that's where it begins, and you think, I've had incidences where, like, we're doing after-action reviews for our mental health because just the shitty set of critical factors we had to deal with, and that was kind of the thing I kept coming back to. Is they're like, well, this is horrible, and how could we, just you wonder, how does the world, a mom set her kids on fire. How's that happen? And just the unique set of things that you see. Well, people are going to have trouble processing some of those kind of evil things that they see during the course of a shift. So what I came back to in the thing is, well, you got there first, what'd you do? Well, it was cooking, so we laid a line. Okay, that's good. So you had an uninterrupted water supply. Then what'd you do? Well, we got dressed because we were coming back from an EMS call, and then we did X, Y, and Z, and it took us like 30 seconds to get our shit on and actually get the line off, and those kids are burning. Then you're like, well, what's the academy say for pulling an 1.5 inch attack line? Well, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Okay, so you did it in 30 and had your shit on. You had water going in 45. Hey man, if I was a burning kid, 45 seconds, how long did it take to get everybody to the hospital? Well, they were there, 4 patients transported before 30 minutes was up. They were at the hospital. So you start writing it on the board and say, here's your critical factors, here's the outcome. You couldn't have done this any better, man. Babe Ruth was knocking them over the fence. Yeah, but everybody died. Hey, yeah, we're all gonna die. That's it. I'm sorry to say that, but that's you. How many dead people you guys see last month? Well, we saw 4 or 5, but that heart attack and this and that. This is horrible. You think it is? You're right. It's wretched. I can't explain that, but we got called to fix it. You fixed it.
You can't outperform somebody who wants to do something so incredibly evil before you're even dispatched.
But at that point, exactly. But at
was
that
cast in
point,
stone.
everybody came together based on the work. It was like, okay, the work saved us here. Only one of them went home that day, and he was taking advantage.
Because they want to sit. And, I mean, you almost have to force them to go home sometime, which I don't think is a good idea either. Some systems, you're going to go home.
That's a strong system. That's powerful. When you come out of that thing, and it's 3 hours later, everybody's doing regular service delivery again. It's crazy. I've seen the opposite. We're like cops. There's nothing. And they have a horrible incident, and it involves them. Like, some of them died, and now they have to go back, and you're like, what are you guys doing? Well, we have to go back to work. Like, what? Yeah, we have to go back to work and pull people over. And you're, oh, I don't want to be.
You don't want to be the first person that gets pulled over after that.
Baby. Yeah.
You know, what would you do? Give us yours.
So mine's consistent and constant messaging, and I think a lot of times leaders forget that.
Yeah.
So as far as being consistent, it's you have an expectation level and you maintain that so people know what to expect from you on a daily basis. And the consistent messaging is a simple message, just like what we've learned from Bruno. Mine was be safe, be effective, be nice. My mom was leaving to go to the car wash last week, and there was something going on in town. And I said, hey, be careful out there. And she goes, and I'll be effective and nice. So she's heard it from me enough that
mom.
She knows, because that was my entire career was three things. That's what I wanted out of everybody.
Three's good.
And I said it all the time. And, we're going through a thing right now with a department I'm working with about vision and stuff. And I was telling the company officers, I said, every day you have a vision. It doesn't have to be the fire chief's vision or where the new station's going to be located or when are we getting the next new fire truck. Make the vision about the job that we have to do today. Right. We're gonna treat our customers with respect. We're gonna be safe in everything that we do, and we want positive outcomes, whatever that is. But you can't just state it once. And I think a lot of times people make the mistake of saying, "Well, I said it already." No. If you're the leader, you got to say it every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
The old man, you gotta live it. We're cutting his videos up, putting the Silverback thing together. The last one I saw, he was talking about that. He says, when I became the fire chief, I was doing these meetings to get everybody up to speed. He says, I retired 28 years later. I was doing the same damn meetings to get them up. He says, you never can stop doing it. It
never stops.
See, you guys have the personality for that. You care, you're engaged. It becomes the ongoing thing that you keep pushing out. The fire chief has to have that level of involvement.
Yeah.
It took me a while to learn it, though.
Yeah, well, and you guys did. I am happy I was never a fire chief for those reasons. I could do what I wanted to do. I was always better a little bit lower in the organization. Yeah.
But you had a consistent message lower in the organization.
Yeah. No, I did what I was supposed to in my thing.
People knew what to expect from you.
100%.
Without a
When you
doubt.
sat on the bench with those guys at that station, you were sharing them once again.
Oh, yeah. They knew. And
No surprise.
Well, and I'm sure, like, maybe a shift or two later, they're probably, do you think he knows? Well, yeah, that's why I was here. Yeah.
He knows sin.
Yeah. He can smell.
All right, you guys want to do a timeless tactical truth?
Every time.
Hell yes.
Timeless tactical truth from Alan Brunacini, and this is from the archive file. These aren't from the cards.
Oh, okay.
The farther back in the system you manage and measure, the more effective you will be. The farther back in the system you measure, the more effective you will be. I think that's really talking about some of these performance issues and perspective, maybe a little bit, right?
Vance, coming out of the recovery process, Southwest Supermarkets, we did all the stuff, right? Incident scene shit. Strategic, tactical task. We were left with the task at the end. And so we had gone through a set of experiences with the training committee about what we were doing, and we were just authorized to do it. We were going to do it. We were going back to that same training committee and saying, there's some stuff in recruit training you need to fix. to your point, is we're going all the way back into the task level here. Deep back with air management and the way we look at that. And we're not doing the test of manhood anymore here on the grinder, where you have to work till you shit your pants. And I went through 27 bottles of air on Tuesday and chopped 85 telephone poles in half, and I've proven myself again. Well, when you transfer that same behavior over to the fire ground, you become a liability because you're running out of air all the time and staying in the hazard zone. Well, it was issues like that, is matching our tactics to today's buildings. Yeah. So, and the fire chief had already started a lot of that, but we were kind of picking up there. So now that would be just for structural firefighting, going back to that piece of it.
I think, and I would, just to build off that, and I think that has to do with distance from the problem. If you're up there next to the problem, wherever the problem is taking place, these are those old fire chiefs that say, I got to be where the smoke is and where the heat is and all. But I think organizationally there's a lot to be said with that too, where fire chiefs and leaders, battalion chiefs, captains need to take a step back and look at this without passion or prejudice. You've heard that saying before.
Yeah.
And don't get too emotionally connected.
Clinically, critical factors.
Yeah, you look back, just like you said, standard condition, standard action, standard outcome. But you need to step back and look at some of these issues. And I remember the times that I was a fire chief where I got wound up a little bit, is I got emotionally connected to the problem, whatever that problem was, and I got too involved with it. And I think back to when I was in the military, and this is a long time ago, right? And I was a crew chief on a Huey, and the way we used to time, we didn't have timing lights for the main rotor or the tail rotor. So what we would do, true story, is the pilots would start up the rotors, and they'd get them at a certain speed, and then we had a long broomstick with a piece of chalk on it, and we would go, ready? And he would look at you and go, pop, pop, and you try to hit one blade, and you pull it down, you put everything down, say, okay, you hit the right blade, you hit this blade number one, we're going to raise that one up, or bring this one down. And we did the same thing. So that wasn't so bad. But when we went to the back rotor, and you're standing on this side of the tail, and you got that same stick, and that thing going, woo, 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 and it's spinning at 3 times the speed of that, and you're taking the stick to try to hit that, you're too close to the frickin' problem. I'm thinking, why am I here? There's got to be a better system of that. Too close to the problem is a problem.
Yeah.
I want to use that example because when you said it, it's like, what was it in my life where I really felt like I was too close to realize how screwed up the situation is? That's the way we did it back then. But fire chiefs need to step back. Leaders need to step back sometimes. Like when you run up on somebody who's doing something wrong and just start screaming the shit at them, or somebody comes in late and you're a captain and you go up and you start mounting them, take a step back and say, okay, what's happening? Why are you late? Well, I'm late because my grandma, died on her way to a bar mitzvah or whatever the hell that is. And then, or I'm late because, or I'm doing it this way because you don't see what's happening here. And I just remember fire chiefs and supervisors I've had, not fire chiefs, but battalion chiefs and supervisors along the way, who would come up and get on my ass as a young paramedic or young fire captain and start getting on my ass without saying, hey, here's why I'm doing this, dumbass. Oh, yeah, keep doing that. So I think sometimes we get too close to the problem and we need to back up and just take it in before we decide how we're going to manage this.
Well, you got to define the problem fully before you figure out what kind of action you're going to use to solve it. So, like the late person, it's not okay to be late, but there's a reason you're late, and that's really kind of what you're managing at that point.
Yeah.
And so, like the guy who's, his mom's dying of cancer and he had to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
You're like, okay, you got some stuff going on in your life, and should you even be here today?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you should take a week or two off if this is going to be an end of life thing that you have to deal with. Whereas like the 23-year-old guy that shows up half an hour late because he just slept in because I just was up too late last night. And well, that's a different set of critical factors.
You won't know the difference until you slow down, like an IC.
Yeah.
Go through a process of identifying what's happening, then make your decision, and then act.
And I think there's a desired outcome part of that too. Like by having this conversation of the action I'm taking, what is my desired outcome?
Yeah.
So going and yelling at somebody and getting all up in someone's grill because you didn't like something, like if I say it in that way, am I going to get the desired outcome, or is there a smart way to address this?
And there's fire chiefs that try to correct an organizational problem by implementing something without really thinking about it. And this has it's like drugs, it's like medication. For every effect, there's an adverse effect. So you got to work those things through instead of just implementing what Bruno call that ready, fire, aim approach. Is I think that's what he meant.
You said it. The process. You have a process you use. Remember, like early in our careers, the police chief, they had a process and he didn't use it.
Yeah.
It's like we're going to do an investigation, and then the next day he just fired 7 people. And they're like, well, the investigation's not done. Yeah, well, I've heard enough, and they're low lifes. They're out of here. Yeah. Well, a year later, he's hiring them back with back pay and everything else. So that just kind of became it's odd when you look at like public safety figures. And the other day I was watching something with like Sheriff Joe, and they were still talking about the hundreds of millions of dollars of liability that's still there because of some of the practices that the sheriffs were doing at the time. And that hasn't gone away. And it's like, no, you didn't use the system. It's a system of laws. You should be familiar with those. That's what you use to lock people up with. You can't. So now you're breaking the law, but, oh, well, that's okay because it's me. And you're like, ah. Well, Vance, and that's, I think, a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the world today, is it's like, okay, once I get in a position of power, there's no accountability for me. I can do whatever I want because I have this position. And you trying to stop me is almost an act of war. And you're like, well, no, this is, we have these treaties that we live with each other that we kind of have to live within the lines. That's.
Yeah.
I love that term, social contract. We have, for us to be good citizens, we have a social contract with one another. And part of that with leadership is that we are going to take care of our people. I mean, people are counting on us to do that.
See, and part of that is calling when they do something wrong, fix it.
Yeah.
Not the cool guy.
Well, you have to lead. That's what it is I'm leading the organization in the work they do. I don't care what religion you are, what sexuality none of that makes any difference. You got to be able to deliver the work. That's all that matters here. And if you'll do that, we're good. That's all we ask, is you just do this set of things. And
what was it back in the day? They used to pick their leader because he was the guy that fit the uniform, that he was replacing a dead guy.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to be a little better than
that. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Great conversation with Nick and Terry. And thank you all for listening to the B Shifter podcast. We'll talk to you soon. Woohoo!